afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to our webinar on navigating the U.S. energy transition. I'm Jerry Polachek, president of Aggreko's U.S. IPP Solutions business, and I'm excited to be here today with you to explore the rapidly evolving U.S. power landscape. We find ourselves at a pivotal moment, facing unprecedented growth in power demand, while adapting to newly released federal policies that are reshaping how renewable energy projects are developed and financed. Over the next hour, we'll unpack the key market and policy drivers transforming the U.S. energy sector. We'll also share actionable strategies to help you mitigate risk and optimize your energy procurement in this dynamic environment. I'm especially pleased to be joined by two distinguished industry leaders. Alex Leff, partner at Clifford Chance, brings deep expertise in advising power and renewable energy companies on project finance, acquisitions, and tax equity structures. Kristen Tobias, president and co-founder of Energetic, leads a firm specializing in energy procurement with a strong focus on sustainability and long-term value creation. Together, we'll offer insights and practical guidance to help you navigate the transition with confidence. So turning to today's agenda, I'll begin with a brief introduction to Aggreko and share our perspective on the major shifts currently reshaping the U.S. power market. Next, Alex will deliver a timely briefing on the latest federal policy developments and their implications for both power and renewable energy sectors. Kristen will then provide a broader market overview highlighting current energy procurement trends and how evolving conditions are influencing decision-making for her clients. To close, I'll offer a set of actionable recommendations we're sharing with our commercial and industrial clients, focused on how to unlock value and stay resilient in this fast-changing energy landscape. Our formal briefing will run approximately 45 minutes, after which we'll open the floor for your questions. Feel free to post them in the chat at any time during the session. Let me kick things off with a brief introduction just to provide some context for my remarks today. So I've spent nearly 25 years in the power sector, and about 2 decades ago, I helped co-found GE's Renewable Energy Investment Group, which deeply influenced my experience navigating the energy transition. More recently, I co-founded Aggreko's US IPP business, which we launched 3 years ago with a focus on developing, constructing, owning, and operating solar and battery storage projects. Our IPP business is part of Aggreko, a company with over 60 years of experience serving customers around the world since its founding in the UK. Today, Aggreko stands as a global leader in temporary and mobile power, temperature control, and energy solutions, delivering reliable, flexible support to industries navigating change. This slide highlights some key facts about Aggreko to give you a sense of our scale and capabilities. 2 points I'd like to emphasize are Aggreko's strong financial foundation and its expansive global footprint. We operate in over 70 countries, with the United States as our largest market, home to more than 1,300 dedicated professionals. Aggreko's global reach uniquely positions us to support US-based multinationals with energy solutions that span borders, ensuring consistency, reliability, and innovation wherever they operate. Turning now to the IPP business I lead here in the US, our core focus is to develop, construct, own, and operate distributed and small utility scale solar and battery storage projects. Our mission is clear. We deliver turnkey energy solutions to commercial and industrial customers, providing them affordable, clean power through megawatt-scaled infrastructure designed for long-term performance and reliability. So this map offers a snapshot of our US operating footprint for solar and battery storage assets. Over the past 3 years, our IPP business has experienced tremendous growth, expanding rapidly to meet rising demand for clean, reliable energy. Today, we're proud to have more than 150 active projects across 15 states, representing over 2.4 gigawatts of capacity. This scale reflects both the strength of our development platform and team and the trust our customers place in us to deliver results. Okay, now that we've covered Aggreko's background and our growing footprint, let's turn our attention to the broader US power market and explore how it's evolving. So the US energy landscape is undergoing a profound transformation, and understanding these shifts is critical to navigating what's ahead. For most of the past 2 decades, change in the power market was driven by the supply side. In the 2000s, fracking unlocked low-cost natural gas, which fueled a boom in combined cycle generation. Natural gas capacity rose from about 14% in 2000 to around 40% today, while coal declined from 34% to just 13% today. Over the last 15 years, wind, solar, and battery storage surged thanks to the steep cost declines and federal incentives. In 2010, they made up about 4% of installed capacity. Today, solar, wind, and storage accounts for about 30%. Meanwhile, electricity demand remained flat as population growth was offset by efficiency gains and reduced industrial load, creating a stable environment for utility planning. So that stability is now being upended. In the past 2 years, data center expansion and electrification have triggered a sharp rise in demand. The explosion of AI is accelerating this trend, with forecasts pointing to sustained exponential growth, placing unprecedented pressure on an already strained grid. This is the new reality that we're operating in. So let's take a closer look at the evolving supply side of US power generation. Over the past few years, especially since the landmark passage of the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022, the conversation around power supply has shifted dramatically. What used to be a story around coal retirements has really become one of rapid renewable energy expansion led by solar, wind, and battery storage. In 2023, renewables made up 77% of all new generation capacity. By 2024, that figure surged to 93%, so underscoring a seismic shift in how America powers its grid. The dominance is really driven by 2 key factors: cost leadership. Solar and wind consistently deliver the lowest cost of electricity to consumers, and speed and reliability. These technologies are proven, bankable, and can be deployed faster than traditional thermal power projects. The IRA added even more momentum, unlocking a suite of accessible tax credits that supercharged project economics and accelerated deployment timelines. So depending on where you sit in the power sector, this imagery may have a bit of hyperbole or actually may be a bit understated. For instance, if you're working in the offshore wind energy sector right now. So the OBBB is Trump's signature piece of legislation and became law on July 4th. It aims to reshape US energy policy by curtailing IRA-driven tax credits that have fueled rapid renewable growth. Even though this policy change brings in the sunset dates for wind and solar tax credits, from my perspective, leading a distributed solar and battery storage IPP, the OBBB is workable and provides a multi-year pathway to access tax credits and deliver value for our customers. Some of the key market impacts that we're seeing. So we expect to see accelerated development. Safe harbored solar and wind projects are being pulled forward into 2026 and 2027. Additionally, more speculative utility scale projects are backing off grid connections, likely leading to reduced supply post-2028. We're seeing increasing risk for a dispatchable power gap, So surging demand isn't matched by natural gas turbine manufacturing capacity, with gas developers now targeting 2030 for new projects. There are also cost pressures for natural gas. Labor and construction costs for gas-fired power have doubled over the past decade. We see the price signals emerging. So PJM capacity prices are up 22% for 2026 and 2027, reflecting the tightening supply. And then our outlook is really to expect accelerated utility rate increases through 2030 as demand strains an aging grid infrastructure. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alex Leff.
Thanks very much, Jerry. That was really helpful and sets up my part of the presentation. So as Jerry mentioned, my name is Alex Leff. I'm a partner at Clifford Chance in Houston. And as he stated, my practice focuses primarily on project finance and tax equity finance. So as you can imagine, I've been steeped in the changes that the OBBB, and thank you to Jerry for using that phrase. I've been trying to get folks to say OBBB rather than the one big beautiful bill. I've been steeped in potential changes that the OBBB will have on the renewable energy market in the United States. And from my perspective, the OBBB is much more than just a tax bill, right? Yes, it sets tax policy, but it also does so many other things. And I want to kind of walk through some of those implications. So the OBBB, in addition to being a piece of tax legislation and establishing U.S. tax policy, it establishes U.S. industrial manufacturing policy. Under the OBBB, we have full expensing for factories and factory improvements, something that we did not have under prior law. We now have full expensing for domestic research and development and full expensing for new capital investments in machinery and other pieces of equipment that are needed to onshore U.S. manufacturing capabilities. So that's certainly one of the nice things about the OBBB. But it also significantly changes the Section 45X advanced manufacturing credit. It ramps down the tax credit for certain components that are produced and sold after 2029. And it gets rid of the credit entirely for the production of wind components after 2027. So certainly a balancing of both good and bad from a U.S. industrial manufacturing standpoint. Clearly, the OBBB has significant implications for U.S. energy policy. As Jerry mentioned, we start to have phase outs for solar and wind federal income tax credits. The rules are relatively simple. If you begin construction on a solar wind project after July 4, 2026, then you must place your project in service for federal income tax purposes prior to January 1, 2028. That means that solar and wind developers only have approximately 1.5 years after July 4th, 2026 to effectively complete the construction on a project. Now, the other side of that coin is that if you begin construction on a solar or wind project prior to July 5th, 2026, then you're subject to the normal course continuity requirements. So the question of the day is ultimately what it means to begin construction. And interestingly enough, we had some guidance come out approximately 1 week ago, which dealt with a new regime on how you begin construction for solar and wind projects. And again, it's important to remember that the law now delineates between beginning of construction on solar and wind projects and beginning construction on all other types of technologies that might be eligible for a federal income tax credit. So the new rule, which I'll just sort of state here quickly, which applies for for solar and wind projects that begin construction after September 2nd, 2025, is that they must begin construction using what's called the physical work test. And for small solar projects, those projects that are less than 1.5 megawatts AC, they can still use what's called the 5% safe harbor. That was what Jerry referenced as the 5% CapEx safe harbor for beginning of construction. As Jerry mentioned, we are seeing a race of project developers and sponsors begin construction on projects to ensure that they begin construction prior to July 5, 2026, so that they're not subject to that placed in service cliff. We're doing a lot of work in this area to help strategize around these new rules, as well as take advantage of the old rules that are, again, still in place until September 2nd, 2025. And that apply for projects other than technologies other than wind and solar. So that's a big part of my practice right now, and something that we're actively working with for, again, developers, landlords when they want to incentivize rooftop solar on their facilities, and other stakeholders. In addition to energy policy, the OBBB establishes U.S. foreign policy in this space. We have very complicated rules now around prohibited foreign entities. Some folks may hear the term foreign entity of concern. That is a proxy for these prohibited foreign entity rules. And essentially what the OBBB does is establish an entirely new regime around who can take these federal income tax credits, and whether a project developer is going to receive material assistance from a prohibited foreign entity. The prohibited foreign entity rules are incredibly invasive. We are now asking clients questions about whether their grandparents are citizens of China. We are asking about whether they have a prohibited foreign entity that holds any of their debt. We're asking about licensing arrangements with prohibited foreign entities. We're asking about the constitution of boards and governing bodies, royalty agreements, and how certain project stakeholders and service providers have access to different pieces of technology. From my perspective, the prohibited foreign entity rules are probably the largest change, and something that will stay with us likely for a significant period of time, even with a change of administration. And it's not simply that the taxpayer, meaning the party that's going to claim the federal income tax credit, that we're testing whether they are a prohibited foreign entity. Again, we're testing whether a taxpayer and a project has received material assistance from a prohibited foreign entity. And again, we have a very complicated set of rules around whether a material assistance cost ratio of a specific project has been satisfied in a given tax year. Again, incredibly pervasive, invasive, and difficult to comply set of rules, which in fact establish a U.S. foreign policy. In addition, what the OBBB does is it clearly establishes the U.S.'s policy on climate change, right? We are de-emphasizing the mitigation of global climate change. In fact, I think we can all state that the administration has been relatively hostile to the concept of climate change, and the OBBB certainly reflects that. The question around the implications of the OBBB is a complicated one, and Jerry touched on this a little bit, right? What we have essentially is significant increases in electricity demand, coupled with a reduction in renewable energy generation. And what that ultimately means is, from our perspective, a skyrocket of electricity prices over the next 25 years. Looking at load forecasts coupled with forecasted electricity prices, We have some indicating that electricity prices are going to increase by 40% through 2030 and double by 2050, right? We are going to have renewable energy developers that may not be able to survive without a federal income tax credit that supports their project. And some would argue that's a good thing. I think others would argue that if we're trying to put electrons on the grid, because right now we need as many electrons on the grid as we can, that we need to incentivize a clean renewable energy resource coming online as quickly as possible. And we'll likely see other financing structures come into play to help mitigate the loss of the federal income tax credits that many of these projects have relied upon for many years. So the implications are broad and in many ways for this industry, not great. And so really the question is, what should folks be doing? So from our perspective, again, right now is a period of planning, exploration, and information gathering. It's essential right now that people take stock of where we're at right now and what procurement looks like over the next 3-5 years. And honestly, there is still some time to act to, for instance, safe harbor projects, partner with developers to ensure project viability over the long term. And again, I think there's a lot to be done, and I think Kristen will probably talk a little bit more about that. Kristen, can I turn it over to you?
Thank you so much, Alex. So a little bit about me, again, Kristen Tobias, really happy to be here and happy to talk about, my world, which is the electricity and natural gas procurement space. So a little bit about our company. So we founded Energetic along with my business partner, Eva Garretts. We are a commercial energy brokerage and commodity trading advisory. We specialize in energy planning and portfolio management for large industrial and commercial clients. We are licensed in every deregulated state, so in Mexico, Australia, and parts of Europe. So we do have international clients as well. We provide customized energy buying and demand side solutions with the end goal being to lower your energy costs, essentially. So I want to get into, really what the state of the market is now as it stands this week. So for our weekly update, the September natural gas contract is down. It's currently trading around $2.87 per therm. The September 2025 crude oil contract is also down nearly by 10 cents at $62 a barrel. And the average wholesale settlements are elevated within PJM at around $31 a megawatt hour. In ERCOT, you're looking at $36 a megawatt hour. NISO, $25 a megawatt hour. And in New England, you're seeing around $27 a megawatt hour. And in MISO at $45 a megawatt hour. Last week, the Henry Hub saw a downward movement due to decreased demand. That's directly affected by the milder weather patterns and milder temperatures in the Northeast. So natural gas production has also slowed due to the satisfactory storage levels, averaging around 107 billion cubic feet per day. Some of the bearish factors that we're experiencing, we have a healthy natural gas storage to go into the winter. We have near record gas production, and we have a lower demand due to milder temps. And some of the bullish factors, we have record high liquid natural gas exports. We also have a data center boom, and we have conflicts in the Middle East affecting that as well. And if we want to look at it, from a macro point of view, what does all of this data mean, and how did, what is the information behind these numbers, and how did we really get here, and what led to this pricing environment? So first off, within the electricity realm, you have heightened demand and record consumption. So the U.S. had a record high consumption in 2024 at 4,097 billion kilowatt hours. And we were forecasted to hit 4,186 billion kilowatt hours in 2025. And that only increases in 2026 with a forecasted 4,284 billion kilowatt hours. The change in the energy fuel mix has also led us here. So we're actually seeing less of natural gas fired electric generation, and that is only representing 42% in 2024, and that has already declined to 40% in 2025. Coal has temporarily increased from 16% to 17% in 2025, but that is actually projected to fall. And renewables are steadily increasing from 23% in 2024 to 25% in 2025. Solar alone surged to 27%, and that added more electricity to the grid than wind or gas. Nuclear is down from 19% to 18%. What also led us here was the infrastructure and storage increases. So the US added over 2 gigawatts of new energy storage in Q1, and utilities are ramping up investments in transmission, looking around like $27 billion, and for distribution, around $50 billion for infrastructure to help with resilience. Also, you look at pricing and politics, everybody's hot topics. So with residential electric prices, especially the newest capacity increases on the rise, with an increase of 4% in 2025. The average consumer is paying around 17 cents across the US. And again, this is mainly driven by, the AI demand and electrification and massive heat waves. Lower supply, higher demand, and that's exactly where we are with that. Looking at the natural gas side, you're looking at, we've actually seen a decline in volatility, which is interesting. The Henry Hub futures eased from about 81% to 69% mid-year. So that indicates a more stable market than we experienced back in April. We're also seeing usage shifts. So gas consumption in power generation, like I said before, is decreasing. However, the demand remains strong for both commercial, residential, and also industrial sectors. And we've also saw growth in our exports. So the export demand is actually reshaping the market flow. And this is followed by the increase of, obviously, production. People want more, we make more of it. So, main key points of this is, the electrification and AI is really transforming our energy consumption trends. And that has resulted a massive boom in demand, a demand that our grid, quite frankly, is not capable of feeding. Also, solar and wind are expanding rapidly, and they're displacing, coal and leveling our natural gas consumption patterns as well. And there's policy uncertainty, like Alex was just touching on. That has also heightened volatility. We saw back when in April with the tariffs, that directly impacted the commodity markets and reached the height of volatility at that time. Also, the rollback of clean energy subsidies poses a risk to the expansion of renewables, which could affect new installations being put online. But again, these are kind of all out of our control directly. But what can we do to actually manage that? But we control what we can. Now more than ever, it proves extremely valuable to surround your company with a knowledgeable team of experts that know what they're talking about and know what they're doing. Planning and timed buying strategies are equally as important. We have to get creative and we have to get crafty. By implementing timed buying strategies that allows you to purchase your electric and natural gas volumes when the market is favorable, ultimately managing your own risk. You can also look at, demand side solutions as well. Looking at, can you curtail during peak hours? And then also enrolling in demand response programs where you can actually get compensated for curtailing during peak events. But ultimately, the end goal is on-site generation. Resiliency is a long-term asset. With increased demand and outdated infrastructure, we're definitely going to start, seeing more blackouts, just like we saw in the 2021 Texas freeze, and definitely more security issues. But when you look at, solar, geothermal, combined heat and power solutions, I mean, they're going to be the ones that provide your operation with independence. And again, that is the ultimate goal and should be, your company's end goal for sure. And I mean, with that, I think I'm going to kick it back to Jerry, who can explain a little bit more about what Aggreko does.
Perfect. Thanks, Kristen, for that interesting perspective on the macro drivers impacting the U.S. power market and some strategies for adapting to it. So from our vantage point as an IPP, we have a few recommendations for C&I energy consumers during this period of market transition and uncertainty. So the first point is to act now. The U.S. power market is entering a new phase of sustained demand growth, and we have a narrowing window to access valuable solar tax credits that are set to expire next July. You should also assess your position. So you should engage your energy advisors to review your current power usage and utility pricing trends to establish a strategic baseline. Thirdly, you can secure long-term savings. So if you're considering on-site solar and storage, now is the time to lock in long-term energy supply and capture significant savings before the incentives sunset. For our C&I energy consumers, we deliver economic and sustainable value through tailored energy solutions. So we offer to design, build, own, and operate on-site or off-site solar and storage systems. And customers can lock in a fixed energy price for 15 to 25 years and typically below current utility rates. So you're getting immediate savings and long-term cost stability. And through the PPA, we're financing these CapEx enhancements. So there's no out-of-pocket costs for our customers. And then second, in select markets, so I think about Maryland, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Colorado, and a few other states, you can lease your rooftop or unused land to provide, ultimately you'll get passive income. So we'll sell the clean energy into the grid through community solar programs. And again, no upfront investment required. And, we're through community solar, we're providing savings to, to local energy consumers. And, customers in those markets, again, can access, lease their roof, and also so that provides economic incentives to do so. And then they can also subscribe as well to these projects. The projects are typically between 1 to 5 megawatts for community solar. They're state level programs, basically. So we could talk more about these solutions, but now is probably a good time to open it up for your questions. Okay, let's just see. I'm just looking at the chat. Alex, maybe starting off with you. So, you touched on the OBBB, and then more recently, when was it, last week, the Treasury came out with guidance on the startup construction. So could you speak in a little bit more detail about it and perhaps parse through those startup construction guidelines for both distributed and utility scale projects?
Absolutely, Jerry. Thanks very much. So it might be helpful just to start with a brief background of what the prior rules stated. The prior beginning of construction guidance, which we've had for years and years and years, basically provided two different mechanisms to begin construction for federal income tax purposes, really for the purposes of being able to achieve some sort of benefit as of the beginning of construction date. Those two mechanisms were as follows. One was called the physical work test. That has the taxpayer, or through a binding written contract, another stakeholder commenced physical work of a significant nature. Now, the physical work test doesn't necessarily focus on the amount of the work or the amount spent. It really focuses on the nature of the work. And the physical work test allowed you to account for both on-site and off-site work. So on-site work may include, for instance, the building of a foundation, the constructing of racking, and the installation of solar modules, for instance. Off-site work required the manufacturing or production of a piece of equipment that was going to be incorporated into a project. There are certain pieces of equipment that were highlighted in prior guidance. The one most known is the transformer. So if you commence construction on a transformer, and that transformer is incorporated into the project, even though that the manufacturing of the transformer occurred off-site, you get to count that as physical work of a significant nature. The other way to begin construction is the 5% safe harbor. The 5% safe harbor effectively requires that you pay or incur 5% or more of the projected eligible cost basis of a project on the date that it's placed in service, essentially the date that it becomes operational. The tricky thing is when you begin construction using the 5% safe harbor test, you don't actually know what your eligible cost basis will be when the project becomes operational. So you usually have to leave a little bit of buffer. Now, those rules in many ways still apply, and most importantly, they apply for the purposes of not being subject to what's called the material assistance rules, right? A part of the rules that fall under the prohibited foreign entity regime that I was talking about earlier. If you begin construction using either the 5% safe harbor or the physical work test prior to the end of this year, then your project will not be subject to the material assistance rules. And we have lots of clients that are seeking to begin construction prior to the end of this year to ensure that they're not subject to those rules. But we have this entirely new regime now where we have a separate set of beginning of construction rules that apply for the purposes of determining whether you're going to be eligible as a fundamental matter for the sections 48E and 45Y federal income tax credits relating to solar and wind projects. And the rules are slightly different. We still have the physical work test in almost its exact form as it was stated in prior guidance. However, as I mentioned, we've lost the 5% safe harbor for projects that are for solar projects and all wind projects for solar projects that are greater than 1.5 megawatts AC. So a substantial shift in how our clients and industry stakeholders are beginning construction to, again, make sure that they're eligible for those credits after July 4, 2026.
Alex, that's a great overview. And, for coming from somebody also in myself being close to the details, I can tell you, our consumers are very well served getting good tax counsel to navigate this, because it is very nuanced in terms of how to qualify, and the difference between qualifying and not is just significant portion of project value. So thanks for that. It looks like we have a couple more questions. So Kristen, we've seen over the last few years, right? Offshore wind really off, New Jersey, New York, and other East Coast states. There have been several gigawatts of projects halted or, ultimately suspended. And, presumably that capacity was planned to come online in the next few years. And so, these states have to, develop new projects to meet the demand, because the demand is there. And so, we talked a little bit about PJM, which is one of the largest U.S. power markets. I think over the last 2 years, capacity prices have gone up, 10x. What do we expect over the next few years?
That's a great question. And ultimately, the answer might vary from what I say today. Come back to me in a year and we'll see what I say again. But what we're seeing as far as installations, there is more solar than anything else. We have seen a decline in nuclear, but what we're actually finding is that a lot of now, defunct, plants, they're actually going back in and remediating them for, future use. So I think that we're going to be seeing a lot of that happening, taking existing structures and then bringing them up to code and utilizing them. But yeah, as far as renewable installations, especially with, the BBB, and the incentives going, I do think that, we're going to see a little bit difference in, the payouts. However, like I said, during my slides, the end goal is resiliency, right? The end goal is permanent, on-site generation. And I think that, that should be everybody's, that should be at the front of everybody's minds, for sure.
Thanks for that, Kristen. I think we have one more question here. Just looking at it, are there other technologies that are out there? And ultimately, the last decade has been dominated by solar, wind, and battery storage. And we've heard that the suppliers, the manufacturers of natural gas generation are, sold out through 2028, 2029. And so, there's also global demand for that natural gas technology. And so maybe I'll take this one. What we're seeing, and we're continually evaluating for our customers, are there new technologies that are cost effective and create value and are reliable? So we're, in the last few years have increased our emphasis on battery, lithium-ion batteries, to support solar projects and support the grid as well, right? They're fast, dispatchable, et cetera, and provide a firming resource. But when you look out beyond that, there are other battery technologies which, again, have been kicking around for a long time. Sodium ion, zinc, iron, airflow. There are a whole bunch of them, right? Usually they suffer from a few different things. Either they're really expensive, the energy density isn't very good, they're volatile. And ultimately, when you think about new technologies, it takes many years to ultimately get them to the point where they're proven and can be banked and financed by the market. And so that is an impediment. So we're not seeing anything in the next 2 to 3 years that's going to really change this complex. You hear, there's a renaissance for nuclear generation and small modular reactors, but the permitting for those, the development cycle are 5-10 years, right? So really, when you talk about nuclear, it's largely, in the 2030s. So, the real trick is the next, 18 months to 3 to 4 years. What are you going to do? And, quite frankly, as we've shown, the utility planners have not had to deal with this type of energy demand in 20 years. And so, there's certainly the grid itself. We didn't even talk about transmission and distribution, but that's been driving a lot of energy price increases for energy consumers through their utility bills. And so you have a number of different constraints, and that's really why, when we look at distributed solar, it's readily accessible, it's inexpensive relative to utility costs, and it's proven and bankable for 20, 35 years. So it should be interesting in the the next few years, but I would say it is a time, if you don't have a plan for your energy procurement, now is the time, because there is a window between now and July to make some plans. And quite frankly, the advisors are willing to consult with you and give you their feedback on, what your options are. So at least you understand them. So I think that's important. Looks like we have one other.
Jerry, just
go ahead.
Oh,
Alex.
sorry. I was just going to mention that one interesting data point is that the federal income tax credits for battery storage were preserved. So unlike
great.
solar and wind, we will have a federal income tax credit for battery storage out into the early 2030s, which, at least from my perspective, will allow the continued proliferation of battery storage.
And Alex, should we open up a can of worms with the fiat provisions on that?
It is certainly worth mentioning that the vast majority of battery storage components right now do come from China, and that does implicate the material assistance rules. But with that, we are seeing lots of proposed onshoring of manufacturing of battery storage modules and components to ultimately combat the loss of the credit and the material assistance rules. But you're right, Jerry. I think there's going to be this real conflict in the next few years between the availability of the credit and the limitations of the use of that credit by through the material assistance rules. That's a good point.
And Alex, some of those regulations are still being drafted, if you will, right, over the next several months. And so, hopefully that's one area where we currently have the runway until the end of the year. And in the interim, hopefully we'll get more clarity from the Treasury and other departments.
Yeah, tons of guidance that's going to come out, Jerry, on this.
No, that's good. Looks like we have one more question here. Where are some of the viable markets for monetizing commercial rooftop space in your community solar example? Maybe I'll take that. I'll start off and feel free to add. If you look at most community solar IPPs or developers, they're clustered around, I would say, maybe a dozen states. And part of it is community solar typically are projects anywhere from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts. And the market framework and policy supporting community solar is done at the state level, right? So these are states that are supportive of supportive of clean energy, and also supportive. What community solar does is for consumers who may not have a good rooftop that's usable for solar, they have an avenue to subscribe to a solar project in their, in their region, where their utility area where they live, and receive credits for subscribing to these projects from their utility. So it's an immediate cost savings, typically about 10% off of your utility electric bill. So it's really, in many cases, a no-brainer to go after it. And it's typically available for both corporations and individuals. And so just coming back to answer your question, the markets that we're active in, and these are most of the primary markets, include Maryland, Illinois, New York is the leader in the US in community solar. New Jersey has a good program, Massachusetts, Colorado, Minnesota. We're hoping, last year there was a lot of hope for California to enter the fray, and it's still going back and forth with the PUC to see if that market can be open. But yeah, that covers it. All right. Well, thank you so much for your attention and joining us. And Alex and Kristen, it was fun doing this together. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.